upcoming negotiations to secure the border. As you all know, the president has opened up the government, and he's agreed, and we've named conferees, the committee that will be focusing on what we need to do in order to continue to keep the government open and also provide the resources to secure our southern border. And we're very pleased to have with us this morning two of the House conferees who will be on that committee. And so I'm going to invite first the Republican ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, Mrs. Granger, to talk a little bit about her participation in the negotiations.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. Just to understand where we are, it's sort of a unique situation that we've got here because we have bills that the Republicans supported in the subcommittees and committees and the Democrats, but we haven't come together and voted on those. So we're going to a conference that is sort of an unusual situation in presenting those and agreeing to them. I certainly hope that we all see this as an opportunity to a time we can come together on this type of funding and agree that our borders need additional help to be secure. People have supported that and understand that. Certainly, I've had so many trips to the border and seen over the years how important that is and the significant negative changes that have occurred. So if we talk about the funding in those bills, things like upgraded technology, personnel to help stop the flow of illegal drugs and weapons, canines that be used to find those drugs, hiring of additional border agents, law enforcement, and staff to keep the Border Patrol ready to carry out their mission, the mission that exists today, not just 10 and 20 years ago. Money to support our immigration court system. All these things, we've had experts that are there saying we need additional money and support, hiring new immigration judge teams to reduce the immigration court backlog, and then also funding for the humanitarian assistance, medical support, temporary housing for the most vulnerable, like the women and children who are victims of human trafficking. All of these things we've seen at the border, and we've heard from our experts that are so important. So as we talk about things like barriers, let's also remember that there are other things that need to be funded, and I think we can all come together. I look forward to our first conference meeting tomorrow, and hope we can all work together in a very positive way to find solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. And now we'll have the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Graves, who's also a conferee.
Well, good morning. I look forward to working with the Republican Leader of Appropriations, Ms. Granger, on this effort. I'm very optimistic about it. I am. This is we're entering what I would consider a new phase of this discussion. A conference committee is where this should be taking place, and this is where we do resolve our differences and work together. So over the next 17 days, I'm very hopeful that my 16 colleagues and myself can come together. We can bridge our differences based on facts, based on evidence, based on experts, but also based on a common objective, and that's to end the humanitarian and security concerns along the border, all the while keeping our government open, and I know we can do that. Now, this is a group of very good people. These are people that Ms. Granger and I work with on a daily basis. And I trust that my fellow appropriators who are on this conference committee are as committed as I am to just rolling up our sleeves and working through this together towards a solution. But to be clear, this is not about one person winning and another person losing. This is a discussion about providing the necessary resources to best secure our homeland. That is it. Nothing more and nothing less. So this is our moment. Take a deep breath, step back, renew our efforts, and find areas of agreement. And I know this morning there are likely to be a lot of questions about what the president may or may not do, what actions he may or may not take as it relates to emergency declarations and such, but I'm not willing to accept failure at this point. This is, we have an opportunity here over the next 17 days to work through this. So I hope that the question you'll be asking next is of the Speaker of the House. And that is, if this committee produces a product in which the Republican leader and I are going to work hard to do, will she give it a vote on the floor? That should be the question.
Well, I want to thank my colleagues on the conference committee for the work that they're embarking upon, and it's very important that we get a resolution that ultimately resolves this crisis at the border. And I think that's where the focus now needs to shift back to. The whole reason that we were at this impasse is because the president's experts, The men and women who risk their lives to secure our border said it's going to take $5.7 billion to give them the tools they need to properly secure the border. Nancy Pelosi's only offer she was willing to put on the table publicly was $1. That was an insult from the beginning, but she said she wouldn't negotiate during the shutdown. Well, now the shutdown is over. It's time for Nancy Pelosi to actually start negotiating in good faith and to put a dollar amount on the table. If she doesn't agree with the experts who risk their lives to secure our border and what it's going to take, then she needs to put a counteroffer on the table and back that up with some real data that shows how that will secure our border. This isn't about, as my colleague from Georgia just said, it's not about who wins or loses a fight. It's about whether or not we are going to finally secure America's border. President Trump has been committed to this goal from the beginning. He campaigned on securing our border, which includes physical barriers like a wall. And let's also look at the fact that over these last few weeks, we've seen a growing number of Democrats move our way. Even Steny Hoyer last week acknowledged that physical barriers have to be part of the solution. And so even if Nancy Pelosi still disagrees with that and this ridiculous concept that walls are immoral, even though they work everywhere they've been placed. You can go to Tijuana, you can look at the success in San Diego, in so many other cities where they've actually put up physical barriers and it's reduced illegal crossings. I think as we're having this discussion, let's keep in mind why we're trying to get this issue resolved, because we have a crisis at the southern border and we have to secure our border to protect and keep Americans safe. For me, it's very personal. So many of us in our districts have heard stories over these last few weeks. I got a call a few weeks ago in my district office from the mother of Spencer Chauvin, a fire chief, who was killed by somebody here illegally. He was responding to a call to help other people, and he was killed by somebody here illegally. And his mom, after we talked, she gave me this coin. And this coin is a reminder and a tribute to Spencer Chauvin. And there are too many other Spencer Chauvins out there that have become victims of people that are here illegally. We're a nation of laws. We're a nation that embraces the greatness of what immigrants mean to our country. Again, we let over 1 million people into our country legally every single year, by far the most generous nation in the world. And what we're trying to say is, while we're a nation of laws, let's secure our border so that we don't have more victims like Spencer Chauvin, and that keep the focus on what this is all about. If somebody winning means that there are more victims like Spencer Chauvin, is that really the definition of victory?
Good afternoon. I want to thank our conferees for their work that they are embarking on. All during these meetings that we had prior, Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer said, we just have to open up government, then we could start discussing. I do believe Speaker Pelosi is out of step with her own party. Just listening to what her members have to say. Remember what we're talking about, 0.1% of the entire budget. The whip told you about the pain that has been caused in many communities. But when you sit and listen to what Steny Hoyer, the number 2, has to say, Democrats open to wall to secure DACA deal, May 2018. Or James Clyburn, there's an environment now for something big to happen on DACA. Remember, Speaker Pelosi, at the time the leader, still holds the record for the longest speech ever given on the floor of the House. It was a year ago, next month. 8 hours, I think, her record that she held. She talked on a very important issue, DACA. She shut the government down over that issue. The president, trying to find a reasonable solution to all of this, offered DACA and border security. The speaker said no. If I look further on what people have said, again, Speaker Pelosi said walls are immoral. Steny Hoyer, the number 2, said, obviously barriers are part of the solution, and they obviously work. That's the same opinion as the chair of Armed Services, that walls do work. It's the same opinion of the chair of Agriculture Committee who said, give Trump the money. Or if you sit back and talk to some of the freshmen, Donna Shalala, freshman from Florida. We've never said a comprehensive border security system won't include some fencing. Or Angie Craig, freshman from Minnesota. There may be places where we need additional barriers. Kendra Horn, we need a smart, comprehensive slate of solutions that may include some form of a physical barrier. Now, Speaker Pelosi was true in her meetings that you just needed the government open to be able to discuss. The real question will be, will she allow the bill to come to the floor if we come to an agreement inside the conference? Even if she disagrees with it, but her conference supports it. You know, the wall or the barrier does a lot of things to protect our country. It also protects many of those who need the protection. When you look at what has happened across this border when it comes to human trafficking, the number of individuals who've been stopped, that is such a small price to pay for such a long-term benefit. I do not want to sit here in 3 weeks and say that we're at status quo. I understand some on the other side are celebrating. I don't think any of those families that have lost loved ones are celebrating. I don't think any of those DACA families are celebrating because Speaker Pelosi would not negotiate, because she thinks a victory was status quo. And I don't think the country expects that of us as well. We can do better. We can solve this problem, and that's what we're committed to do. That's why the conferees will meet tomorrow, and I'll be interested to hear, now that the government is open fully, that they're willing to discuss much of what their own conference is talking about that we need as well as ours. Yes, sir.
I want to ask you a question.
Please.
Following up on that, you referenced DACA being part of the solution with border wall funding in the past from Democratic folks. What is the scope of this conference committee? Are they going to be looking at some of these policy issues like TPS, chain migration, DACA, or is it strictly, appropriations, things you can throw money at, things that you can spend money on?
Well, first of all, in conference, it's on the Homeland Security bill, so they can look at that. But having the House and Senate there, whatever it takes to solve the problem. I mean, the president was the reasonable one that went beyond the scope of what the Homeland Appropriation Bill said, because he listened to what Democrats were saying. He knows there's a concern out there. And I think the American public looks at government and says, you've got to find common ground. If there's a concern on both sides, why couldn't we both come together? Unfortunately, it was only one side willing to come together in the earlier negotiations. So I look to ability to find a solution, and I'll leave it up to the conferees to do that work. Yes, sir.
I have a yes or no question. Will you insist on having the word wall in the conference report?
It could be barrier. It doesn't have to be a wall. Yes, sir.
Acting Attorney General Whitaker yesterday said the Mueller investigation is close to wrapping up. Do you support public release of the report?
Yes, no problem.
And Ms. Cheney and Mr. Scalise, do you support public release of the report as well?
Yes.
It's time that Mr. Mueller is transparent with the American people. This investigation was supposed to be about collusion between Russia and the Trump or Clinton campaigns, and whatever he's found ought to be released, and he ought to wrap that up once he's made it public.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Do you think it was wise for Whitaker to weigh in on the ongoing investigation
How did he weigh in?
when he said that it was supposed to be in 20
No, I think he was just trying to probably answer a question that most of America is looking at. When will this wind down? So I think as his role, he could say if something didn't talk about the investigation, any movement inside it or what the outcome would be. It's just the timeline. And I think it's appropriate that American public understands the timeline. I think it's appropriate that it winds down and finishes. Yes.
I would like to kind of clarify what this border security proposal could look like, because the way that Ms. Granger described it is almost literally word for word what Democrats just said in their press conference. It includes technology, it includes personnel, it includes drug sensors at points of entry. It could include some kind of physical barrier, like literally almost word for word. So
So the conference could be very good then.
It sounds like it, but, you know, how do you semantically sell that to your base, to an Ann Coulter who, you know, and people who think like her who want a wall?
Well, what definition you want to call it, a wall or a barrier? Having come from California, I understand how that works. I also understand the benefits of it, just like El Paso, just like Yuma, Arizona, and others, where illegal crossings have dropped more than 95%. If the Democrats are beginning to discuss barriers, that's a positive in all shapes and forms, because that's not something they've been saying ahead of time. The other things that you talked about that Congresswoman Granger talked about are the things we have been talking about. But these were all the things inside these meetings that we went time and time again with, and hours, that they would say, I can't do that until government's open. So at the end of the day, we do not want status quo, we want a solution, and I think all those elements include as long as well we have a barrier. Yes?
Are you looking to accept only replacement barriers, which have been in past funding deals, or pedestrian fencing, levee fencing? I mean, are there going to be specifics of what you're...
I don't think you should limit the areas that you need. We should listen to the experts, and the experts have told us. That's where they came up with the $5.7 billion. You've got to have barriers in place where there's challenging area. You can use, yes, new technology, and we do. We want to continue to expand that. But if you do not have barriers, you just have an open door for individuals to come across in these wide swaths of areas that aren't controllable. Thank you. Yes? Okay, go
Just to
ahead.
say something, I'm going to go back to the first question you got, and that's, are we just going to throw money at something? Let me tell you what, so much of what we're talking about, in addition to a barrier, is saying what should be been funded year after year. I've been to the border so many times, and one of the trips that I took, I remember walking and the Border Patrol was showing me something. We were walking, and we could see these sensors on the ground. Someone just took off his hat, threw it across the sensor, and that means that cut off that. Well, we should have done this years ago. So it's adding. It's not just everything that's happened. We're in, I think, a crisis and emergency right now. But this funding should be happening as we keep our borders, not just border, safe.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.